Thanks, Tom, for being here with me. For anyone who doesn't know, Tom's an Endeavour winner in the 200s. I think you've come second at the Nationals when I was at Hailing, and a few other kind of top performances, and a bunch of sandy shells in there as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, cool. So Tom's agreed to come and do an interview on like how he thinks about his 200, how he sets it up. The idea of this video is it's supposed to be a bit of a introduction to the rig settings, but instead of just being like a list of numbers, it's going to try to include the kind of feel and kind of link that to how you're sailing the boat as well. So without anything further, how would you set up your boat for kind of medium winds, Tom?
Yeah, so medium winds, to be honest, I always set up for the upwinds and then just kind of let the downwinds look after themselves, especially for championship racing, because I don't know if you get to the women mark first, and that's 80% of the battle. Unless you're going to be like planing when no one else is planing, then the downwinds are less of importance, especially with the gate starts. So when I basically completely focus on the upwind in terms of tuning, get my boat fast compared to others on the upwind. And what I want is basically two things I'm aiming for all times. So first of all is the jib entry and looking for the telltales to kind of fall away evenly in medium winds as you look up the jib. So you've got the entry angle kind of roughly the same all the way up. Um, and that I'm kind of doing with Jib Cunningham and then obviously the place of the jib car and actual jib sheet tension. So that's probably super critical, and then a little bit of your actual rig tension in terms of your jib fall off, jib sag. And then on terms of the mainsail, just always looking for the boom to be coming just off the center line. Literally just like 3-4 inches of ease off the center line seems to be like a happy place for the boom. But as soon as it goes out further than that, then you start closing off the slot and getting a lot of drag. And obviously, if it's bang on center line all the time, then it's not a bad thing, but it probably means you're a bit underpowered. I find the boats power up upwind quite quickly as well. So I'd say medium winds, you're probably always like getting towards quite a hefty chunk of kicker and the beam just coming off the center line. So that's what I'm looking for in terms of how the boat feels.
Yeah. And so what's
Yeah.
that going to look like on the jib? So you're looking for all your telltales streaming on the jib and breaking an even time. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, I tend to try. Obviously, everyone tries to sail as high as possible in the two. There's not a huge benefit from footing off and going super quick, and
Mhm.
there's variations on a very narrow window of modes.
Yeah.
I always try to sail just with the windward telltale, just breaking on the jib.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, just looking for them all to kind of break evenly as you look up the jib, and obviously if you see the top ones are breaking first, then that means you've got too much jib twist. And it's very unlikely to happen. But if the ones at the bottom are breaking first, then that can mean something about your jib downhaul or jib sag as well.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then there's a couple of other things I just kind of look out for, and I'm not sure if they're fast or not, but they've just become habit. Like it's how it's looked when the boat's been going well. So I always have a really tight piece of elastic on the forestay, and that helps you see your kind of sag on your forestay, how far your jib's pulling off, because it'll pull that forestay tight. And
Mhm.
I always look from where I'm sat in the boat. I'm not sure where it looks from anywhere else, but obviously that hopefully from where you sat in your boat be helpful for the people sailing it. Looking for basically like an inch and a bit of jib sag.
Okay.
And that always ends up being around 27 loose tension on the shrouds. It gives us the kind of right amount of tension in that forestay.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and then in terms of the main being powered up, I think that's a balance between how much kicker you're willing to pull on and um and then just how you have your spreaders set up um, for the feel. I've always felt like the 200 is quite a bendy mast, so I've gone for the spreaders quite long to give a bit of lateral stability to it,
Mm.
possibly less forgiving like that. But that's how I've gone with it, and I think pretty ballpark on the actual deflection. I think a lot of people say have it so when the tip rig tension's on, it's just about inverted, not quite, but as soon as you pull the mast up, then it's pretty much a straight mast, and then from there on in, as you pull on a load of kicker, then it kind of comes back to where it feels happy.
Okay, cool. And rake wise, what kind of region would you be in?
Yeah, so I've actually, I sailed with my wife for the longest time, and to be honest, we sailed on 2110 on the old decks, measured obviously to the top of that rudder gantry.
Hmm.
Uh, we ran that for the longest time and only really went back to 21.9 when it was pretty windy, like over 20 knots.
Hmm.
Basically, as soon as we were comfortably planing downwind, and that was a good kind of marker for upwind.
Yeah.
Um, I think recently I've sailed, well, last year I sailed with quite a few different crew sizes. So James Crosley, a crew for internationals, was quite light, and we were on the light side. And actually, rakes back. We spent most of the event on 21.9,
Okay.
and I don't think it never got windy enough, but we would have used 21.8 as well. But those numbers are corrected for the new decks. The new decks, the gantry is a little bit lower, so you just have to, I think, add about an inch or 3/4 of an inch on for the new decks, just peculiarity of how you measure it. So if people are
Yeah.
wanting to convert, but that's it. And that just goes back to where your boom is on the center line, affects your jib shooting angle a little bit as well. So you'll find it kind of coincides with the cars as well. But yeah, that's where we've been. And I mean, it's pretty much the same as everyone else. I don't think there's any huge secrets.
How would you, so say it was going to light winds, how would you be adjusting your setup there?
Yeah, so we never went any further forward than our base in terms of rake, but I think the big things for us in light winds were moving the jib cars forward a hole, and we'd move them out. We've moved them about quite a bit actually, and the jib Cunningham as well. So easing that off, so I'm starting to get the scallops, kind of crinkles in the front of the jib.
Hmm.
Depending on your age of the jib, a brand new jib, you can pretty much sail with a few crinkles in the jib all the way up to when you're both fully hiking, and then just flatten it out and progressively pull on a bit more jib Cunningham from there.
Yeah.
But an older jib, even in the light, if it's a very tired jib, you might want to be just cleaning up the front of it. That's just a feel thing on where the draft is on the jib. So I think they're the key things for the light winds is really the jib. The main, there's not much really you can do once the mast is super straight. You're not putting on much kicker. There's only so much work you can make a mainsail do before it's just a huge bag. So I think it's more about the jib entry and the light.
Okay, nice. And yeah, and then changing to like really windy stuff. You're going back an inch on the rake if you're with a lighter crew. If you're with a heavier crew, you're not changing that?
Yeah, I mean sometimes a heavier crew might just go for always the kicker super hard no matter which crew, but yeah, it can survive a little bit more with a heavier crew. I find on the kind of upright setting. Um, Very much just looking at the boom where that's going to. As soon as that kind of goes, past that off the center line, then it
Hmm.
starts to feel uncomfortable, and just that kind of stuttering you feel when the boom's kind of bouncing off the wind coming out the jib slot. So yeah, normally just rake back, go back on the jib cars as well. If you've not done all that already, and then a good bit of jib Cunningham as well, just so you're starting to like see a few creases kind of emanate from the kringle at the bottom, and that would normally see you going well. But just a heap of kicker and just a little bit of Cunningham just to pull the draft back forward, really. Not is I've only got 4-to-1 Cunningham. I think you can put more on that. I don't know many people do. Give it a firm tug until it's just kind of neatened up the sail, but that's about it for when it's windy.
Yeah, nice. And I think I've sorted you've got like a sets of telltales on your mainsail. What would you be using those for in terms of, I don't know, setup or just whilst you're sailing?
Yeah, so I've always found having a lot of telltales on is quite nice, but the main telltales are really just for downwind and twist.
Okay.
Um, so I found it's actually a bit harder in boats with fractional kites to get the twist nice because um, back if you're sailing a 49, you've got the kite ahead of the whole of the rig, so it's kind of
Hmm.
presetting the wind for the whole sail, so you don't
Yeah.
the twist can just be a little bit more progressive, whereas the 2 and the 800 to a degree as well, the top of the sail, sometimes you kind of lose touch with what that's doing in its own wind.
Hmm.
So I just like to have the telltales on so I can just tweak the kicker a little bit. And obviously when it's super light, the kicker's pretty much all the way off, so the boom's almost bouncing. It's just catching it downwind, and then sometimes I'll only really pull the kicker on for jibes just so the battens pop and you get a little bit of resistance to kind of roll jibe against. But yeah, once you're sitting on the side, even one person, that will very quickly just become unmanageable, horrible twist, and you'll feel the boat won't respond to the trimming you're doing with the boom. It'll just feel like you're sheet and it'll just all wobble about rather than move. So yeah, I'm just using those telltales just to kind of keep the sheeting angle right up the rig and progressively kind of pulling on a little bit more kicker downwind um up until when we're both planing, and once you pop on the plane you can pull like actually a decent amount of kicker on, and again just looking at those telltales to make sure the whole of the sail's working right the way up.
Okay. Yeah, nice. And then on downwinds, what kind of what maybe more in the like the surfy conditions, what are you doing kind of in terms of kinetics and how are you and the crew moving around the boats?
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt that the helms just got it a bit easier in the 200 because the back of the cockpit's a lot more open in terms of moving around.
Hmm.
And if the crew can stay locked in, kind of braced, and just focus on trimming, because as soon as you start, obviously, with the kinetics and changing angles a lot on the waves, then there's a hell of a lot going on just trimming the kite. So getting the crew kind of locked in, their head in a place where they can actually see the lift of the kite and then have the helm move around. I always kind of like to put one foot on the leeward side and one foot kind of um, underneath my bum on the windward side, and then you can kind of shift your weight right across the boat.
Hmm.
And just obviously quite big movements from right down almost on the leeward side, popping up to the windward side as you make the turns on the waves, just to basically minimize the rudder movement and keep the flow going. Um, but I mean, I'm not sure I'm always the best in waves, really. A bit of even though sailing at Hailing, I always feel like there's probably some better people out there who've come from the 470s and 420s. I think that's probably more comparable to the
Hmm.
200 downwind in terms of kinetics, whereas I've come from more of a skiff background where you're kind of just bouncing over them and hoping you don't hit too many rather than much in the way the kinetics.
And then in terms of like other little things, so batten tensions on the upwind or for the rig in general, is that something that you'd play around with much between different days or yeah, I don't know, what do you think's I mean, first off, what do you think's the effect of tightening and loosening them? And then
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think there's a danger that you can rely on battens to give you sail shape.
Hmm.
Um, Whereas the truth is this the sail shape exists there already, and the
Hmm.
sail and the battens are just pushing in the shape that you've given it from the mass curve, how that meets the luff curve
Hmm.
in your leech tension. So I've never been a big advocate of winding on lots of batten tension, because I think you're just really stretching the cloth and making it harder to pop the battens.
Hmm.
It's less of an issue on a gate start, but on a line start, it's pretty horrible to have really tight battens because the sail just is always popped into quite an aggressive shape and it will move you forward. So if you're struggling to hold station, then a bit less batten tension actually really helps
Hmm.
in the pre-start. Then yeah, wind. I'm just once I've pulled on all the controls and look at the sail, I'm just taking out any nasty creases with the batten tension, but not a lot more than that. I always think the top batten, if you're, it should pop in a roll jibe. I think I mentioned earlier, I pull on a bit of kicker before a roll jibe and the
Yeah.
like. It should pop the batten, but sometimes you'll have to give a pull of the Cunningham to pop it. And that's a good indication you've got just enough. But if you're starting to get super frustrated with the battens popping, then that's another telltale sign that you've got too much on. But yeah, I've never experimented with kind of off-brand battens. I know 200 you can pretty much pick whatever batten you want. I think all the RS classes are like that, but I've never kind of played around with exotic carbon battens or different curvatures to them. Just stuck with what's come from hides, and it's served me well.
How about centerboards? Is that something you'd ever change from like I don't know, I've always found that kind of out the factory, the rope that they put on is really thick. And I don't know, I always feel like you get slightly better pointing with a thinner rope and getting it further down. I don't know if you've experimented with that or anything.
Yeah. I mean, what we've always done is put on a thinner rope, and I actually don't tie my centerboard down. I've got the case packed out instead, and then we only really use a bit of elastic, and it's quite stretchy elastic for hailing. So if we do hit the bottom, the board comes up quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's been quite good packing out the case because it obviously stops the board from wobbling around and keeps it upright for starters rather than slopping over. And yeah, pretty much upwind, we're all the way down all the time up until when a rake, and then we'd have like the eye in the board where the rope goes through, maybe I don't know, an inch above the case. Be fairly minimal. And then downwind, we've kind of we get over the years we've gone back and forth with what we do with the board downwind, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think it's straight line. It's definitely quicker to go up with the board, in especially in those soaky modes. But you if you've got other boats around you and it's a big fleet and you need the maneuverability to be changing angles quickly, then you just can't do that with the board halfway down, and it gets a little bit frustrating just turning the boat.
Mm.
So we tend to keep it pretty much down all the way around the course as a result of that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you did raise it, would that change the kind of style in which you sailed the boat at all? I don't know. I've seen a lot of people when they do raise it have like a lot of leeward heel compared to maybe normally, but I don't know if that's something you've
Downwind.
noticed at all. Downwind, yeah.
Um, I don't really like sailing with leeward heel
Mm-hmm.
downwind. I'd always, even when it's pretty light, try and keep windward heel on, if anything, to float the kite round.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so not from our perspective, no. But
Okay.
maybe that's why I was struggling with it. Maybe that's why it felt unstable if I was trying to go centerboard up and and windward heel. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean that all makes sense. Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of most of my questions. I don't know if there's any kind of other things you think I should have hit on there, but yeah.
Um, I think one of the other things that catches people out is the kicker placement of the attachment on the boom. It's
Yeah.
quite critical, and the sliders where they slip along the boom do slip quite often. So
Hmm.
I'd always tell people if they're struggling with their rig setup. Often people think it's a rig setup because it starts looking like really unusual mass bend when when that's out of place.
Yeah.
So first thing to do is to check that's in the right place along the boom. So I think
Yeah.
I can't remember what the
Is it
numbers. I put the
first
numbers
seven
out.
centimeters maybe? I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
So if you are struggling and you've got all the setups the same as everyone else and everything else is checked off the list, then that's another thing to just make sure is correct, and that can make quite a big difference to how the sail reacts to kicker upwind.
Okay. Great. Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, cheers. No worries.